So we'll see this sort of format, this introduction methods, results, analysis, findings, discussion, and conclusion sections. We'll see it used to really great effect in the student samples that we're going to read. And if you've never written a paper for an English class this way, or you've never written a paper for a writing or English class that does what we're asking you to do, that's okay. I have a feeling for almost all of us, this is probably the first time we've endeavored to 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 do something like this, to take ideas from writing studies and analyze and produce new information about how real world writing rhetoric, how real world rhetorical situations work. As I said, we are writing for people who are interested in literacy, in rhetoric, in writing studies. People like Swales and G and Johns. People, it's helpful to imagine our audience as the authors with whom we're going to be entering the conversation. These are important details. Just like in the last assignment, you are allowed to choose your academic citation style, but we must use it consistently and correctly once we choose it. So lastly, the way I want to end our discussion, our overview, is of this project. As I said, a lot of us are doing this for the first time, and we're very aware of that. I'm very aware of that. If right now you're thinking, I have no idea what part of writing in my discourse community I'm going to examine, I've created a pretty robust suggestion, guidelines, and sources guide here for you. Here's kind of how I suggest going about it. If you have a hunch about something, that's great. I suggest chasing that down. If you don't, last week and this week, we're really learning some concepts that are easily applicable to our real-world discourse community situations. So, for instance, I think I've organized different possible trajectories for you based on these ideas. So if you really enjoyed the idea, if you really enjoyed G's idea of discourse with a capital D, how he defined literacy, or if you really liked what John's had to say about identity and authority in communities of practice or discourse communities, I say you start here, right? Each of these, I've organized them by topic. I've given, if you're really interested in how your discourse community uses language, that uses discourse or literacy or identity, right? Here's a question you could ask. What does it take to be literate, right? To perform the discourse with a capital D in this discourse community. Here are some other questions you could ask about your discourse community if you're interested in these concepts of writing studies, right? This is going to bring us into discussions of maybe enculturation or mediation, or what G calls the identity kit, or ways of being in the world, primary, secondary, dominant, non-dominant discourse. If we're interested in this, here are some possible sources that we could use to help us create that research space, to help us in our introduction say, here's what others have said, before we say, here's how I'm going to apply and analyze it in my own specific discourse community. I've even included student examples of what it looks like when students do projects, surrounding these concepts. I'll let you check out Alex's paper, but there are, this was actually published in Wu's first year writing journal called Writing Unbound. We'll talk about that at the end of the term. But the point here is, if you don't really know, if you're kind of thinking, I don't know where I'm going to go, I think you should choose what topic, what element of language and writing that you want to focus on in your discourse community based on the concepts or readings or discussion boards that you found most interesting. If this week you really get into the readings about genre, um, I say you find and rhetorically analyze a genre in your discourse community. If in reading Perry classes, learning the language, you found that really cool, that specific lexis analysis, I say we do something. I say you do something that's sort of an analysis of the lexis of your discourse community. Um, the last thing I'll note is they're not. Of course, one thing you might notice is that this Mirabelli reading is suggested in all of these. There's definitely, of course, there's going to be crossover, and of course, if we're talking about literacy with a capital D, maybe we'll also be examining some specialized language. Maybe, or if we're really interested in doing a genre analysis. Genre theory necessarily is based on rhetorical theory, so if we're really interested in doing a genre analysis of a specific genre that our discourse community uses, there's going to be some overlap in the rhetorical analysis. I don't care. I'm not going to say, oh, well, are you doing a rhetorical analysis or are you doing a genre analysis? They're kind of very, very closely related. I've just organized them this way so that you can maybe say, okay, of all of the things that we've read this term, I really find classes' ideas about lexis the most compelling, so that's where I want to focus. So maybe before you do anything on this assignment, aside from reading and understanding it, check this out and just do some brainstorming and just think back to the readings we've done, the ideas you've been introduced to this term, and ask yourself which ideas are, the most compelling to you, or which ideas do you see most prominently at work in your discourse community. I've done this because I know this is a difficult task. I know what this class asks is difficult, and I'm hoping to help you out a little bit along the way. I also know that we're giving you a lot of agency here and saying analyze some way that your discourse community uses language. So I've really provided, there's a lot of different ways we can go, and instead of having us read a total of all of these pieces and read everything about rhetoric and everything about discourse and everything about lexis and everything about genre, we're all going to kind of diverge on our own path here. And so what I've tried to provide for you here is a little resource and set of readings that we can expand upon once we sort of choose one of our own paths. So my parting words here are, again, as always, let curiosity be your guide. This project can actually be really fun. We get to look at the nitty-gritty details of what's going on in our discourse communities. We get to explain our discourse communities to people who don't understand them. That's a really interesting and fun part of this assignment. And lastly, we know it's difficult. We know we're asking you to do something difficult. That's why I've tried to carefully scaffold this project, and I've even done a lot of the work of providing you sample papers, sources that you might want to use, and even some. I've really tried to model what some of these good research questions look like. Okay, welcome to the Discourse Community Report Project.